Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism, looking at a new book, not new to me, but a new author and book to make a book review in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. L Ron Hubbard, Dianetics. New York Times and international bestseller. 20 million copies in 50 languages. The Modern Science of Mental Health. L Ron Hubbard, Dianetics. So let me tell you a story about this book, not this particular one, because the one that I acquired many years ago got lost in the shuffle of life. But anyways, from 1979, 1980 to 1999, 1990, 10 years, I worked for a major aerospace company. I have a degree in electronics from United Electronic Institute in Tampa. So I did mostly research and development for engineers. I was the technician. They would think things up and I would build them. Even going into the machine shop and making metal items that I might need, like a computer box or a microwave transmitter case or something. So I had a degree in electronics, and I was quite good at it. They would call me Mr. Miracle when something system couldn't get going. They couldn't get it started or running correctly. Somebody would say, "Go get Mr. Miracle. He just touches it and he fixes things." But that wasn't the case. I went to a really good school, and I understood RF, radio frequencies, microwave frequencies, digital signals, and fiber optics, and all of that stuff in my couple years of going to UEI from 1977 to 1979. After I got out of the Army in 1975, spent 2 years in Maine working for a lumber company when I got out of the Army. I joined the Army when I was 17, so when I got out, I wasn't even 21. I was still 20 with my 3 years completed, and I qualified for the GI Bill to go to school because when I joined the Army, the Vietnam War was still on. Long time ago. I'm an older man. But anyway, so I did use the GI Bill and got a degree at UEI, and then tried to pursue a physics degree. After that, going to night school, some courses during the day at the local university. But after 10 years with the aerospace company, I decided to throw in the towel and pursue a different career, because of the things that I saw going on inside these aerospace corporations. But anyways, the story about this book. So during my 10 years at the aerospace company in Palm Bay, Melbourne, Florida, near Kennedy Space Center, and I worked on some of the electronics for the space shuttle and the F-18 jet and the B-1B bomber and satellites in space. Everybody only works on little tiny pieces of a big program. So you never see the big program. You only see the little thing you might be working on, like an amplifier or a filter or electronic things like that. And a modulator where it integrates a signal onto a carrier, or a demodulator where it extracts the signal of a carrier after it's been transmitted. So anyways, during those 10 years working for the major aerospace company, I won't say the name because it might get me in trouble, and I used to have a secret security clearance. But anyways, this aerospace company sent me to Canada, a place called Cold Lake in the province of Alberta, just west of the Rocky Mountains. And the other city, the two cities that a lot of people are aware of because of hockey, ice hockey, and the oiled shale fields would be Calgary or Edmonton. And I spent quite a bit of time in Edmonton, north of Calgary. But anyways, going back and forth to this Air Force base in northern Canada, called a place called Cold Lake. And if you drove a car from Edmonton to Cold Lake, they warned you not to drive at night, because if you broke down in your car, you were likely to freeze to death. It's up there at the parallel level, like with Alaska. So anyways, I was going back and forth every 3 weeks. 3 weeks to Cold Lake, 3 weeks back in Florida. 3 weeks to Cold Lake, 3 weeks back in Florida. For about half a year. And it was a very adventurous time. I have a lot of pictures of the area, and I did make a trip to Banff and Jasper resorts in the Rocky Mountains, from one south end to the north end. That was quite a trip. But anyways, on one of those trips, I was walking on a street in downtown Edmonton. And it's a big city, like New York City, up there in the Northern Territory of province of Alberta. Anyways, so some guy was standing on the street pulling people over, you know, like those census takers or those people who want to get your opinion or whatever. He was pulling people over and said, "Hey, would you like a free book?" And I was a young man. And I said, "Well, yeah, I'll take it. I read a lot back then. And I still do, of course." And he said, "Well, you have to come upstairs and take a test. A psychological test. L Ron Hubbard, Dianetics." So I didn't see anything wrong with that. I was curious. I liked different things, and I liked people. I was very social. Young man. I don't think I was quite 30 years old. Probably 26 or 25, 27. Got to think back about those days. Actually, maybe I was a little over 30, if it was the middle of my tour with that aerospace company. So I went upstairs and I took the psychological test. And it's just a questionnaire, and then they feed it into a computer. And the guy comes out and he says, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, there's something wrong with your psychological test." I said, "What?" He said, "Your mind is multifaceted." He showed me the chart, and I had these 3, 4, 5 spikes on the chart from the questionnaire. He said, "Those spikes represent peak interest. You have a interest about something." And he says, "You have a peak interest on 4 or 5 things." He said, "Most people can't handle a peak interest on 4 or 5 things." He said, "Are you feeling okay?" So I was working for an aerospace company near the beach in Florida. And I was a windsurfer. I was a surfer. Water skiing fool back then, let me tell you. And I read a lot of popular science. I worked in electronics, high research and development, very high technical level materials. And they did call me Mr. Miracle back then, because I could do things that a lot of people couldn't solve, problems. And in electronics and software, I could write code, and used to have little games playing on the computer. So he said, are you all right?" And I said, "I'm fine." And he gave me the book. And I read the book, Dianetics, back then when I was around 30 years old. And it was a fascinating book. And I developed this ability, believe it or not, and it mentions it in this book. But I developed, in the book tells you how to do it. And it tells you about the ethics of doing it, hypnotizing people. So I went and purchased a recorder, a small little recorder about this size, and I would be sitting in one of the taverns in Edmonton or back in Florida or with my friends, and I would tell people I read Dianetics and I could hypnotize people. And there was always this person who would say, okay, hypnotize me. You can't really do it. And what it teaches in this book is basically regression type hypnotism. Had to stop for a moment. So the book described how to solve people's problems. Let's say you were afraid of heights or you were afraid of snakes. The book describes situations called engrams, where if you were a child, let's say 5 years old, sitting in the front yard, and a snake came up to you and scared the dickens out of you, you had this engram in you, like a program in you, because of the fear you were in. And so whenever you saw a snake in your future life, you would be freaking out. Or if you fell from outside of a window onto the ground, you were a baby crawling, then from then on, whenever you were in high places, you would be freaking out. These are little programs that get into your system during the state of extreme fear, anxiety, you being afraid. So apparently when you fall out the window or the snake comes up to you, or many other phobias people have, they're called engrams, and you acquire these at some point in your life. And if you can get somebody to hypnotize you and take you back to that period of time in your life and expose the event as it happens, and you come to deal with it that it was just an event, you can erase that little program in your body and eliminate the phobia that you would have. So everybody has certain types of these phobias or engrams or little program codes in their body. And this is interesting information and important information if you consider where we are now with the worldwide lockdown, and how you get these programs, these engrams, when you wind up in an extreme state of anxiety and fear and all of that. So I was thinking about the future of the world we're living in right now and the state of affairs of people's minds. And when they get in these extreme states of anxiety and fear, they become extremely susceptible to being programmed. Did you know that? That's how the MK Ultra and all these other mind control, secret CIA and Army and Navy and Department of National Security, FBI, CIA, and MI16 and Mossad from Israel, their intelligence agency. They put people in these extreme states of fear, anxiety, where they think they're going to die. And what happens is your mind blacks out. And when your mind blacks out, you can't see my face. When your mind blacks out because of this extreme fear, they can tell you and program you things. And then when you come to, you've been programmed. So you got to get in that extreme state of anxiety and fear. Your mind, your conscious mind shuts down. You're acting like a lunatic. Somebody can speak things to you, tell you what kind of person you are, tell you what you're going to do. And then when you regain your senses, you don't remember being programmed. You don't remember the program, but you now have an engram or a phobia. You get it? So that's how you get it. We all get some sort of that as we're younger. And a person who is a conscious person who has seen a psychotherapist or a hypnotist and been regressed back to that event And it's easy enough to do. If you hypnotize somebody, you can take them back to when they were 15 years old and say, "Are you afraid of snakes?" And I go, "Yes, yes." And take them back to when they were 12 years old. "Are you afraid of snakes?" "Yes, yes." They're hypnotized now. And you take them back to when they were 8, and they say, "No, I'm not afraid of snakes." And they'll even say it in their 8-year-old voice or 6-year-old voice, talking like a child. And when you ask them what their name is when they're hypnotized, they'll give you their childhood name. Maybe their mommy called the little girl Titi, and her name is Teresa. And when I take her back to when she's 5 and discover that the phobia isn't there, and I say, "What's your name?" and she says, in a child's voice, "Titi." So then you know you just have to focus in on the month and the week and the day to the event and find out what happened. You asked her what happened that day, and little 6-year-old Titi will tell you the details about falling out of the window, or the snake, or daddy smacking mommy, or any one of the, maybe a person sexually assaulting the little girl. And it puts them in an extreme state of anxiety and fear. And then they have this phobia, this psychological defect that makes them act in unusual ways. And that's how you do it. You have to take them down to a certain level, the threshold. Let's call it 0 to 4. Let's say 4 is your optimum self. And then let's say you have a little bit of an anxiety. Your boss yells at you at work and threatens to fire you. It brings you down to a 3.5. And if you're really freaking out and he's really serious and you have financial difficulties and your wife's going to yell at you, you go down to a 3. And then if you get home and you find out that little Billy in school was called in by the teacher, that adds on to your anxiety. You just went down to a 2.7, and etc., etc. And then you get in your car to go to the school and somebody sideswipes your car. You just went down to a 2. And you can imagine that your day is probably getting worse and worse by the moment. And anyway, so you're at a 2. And the threshold where you block out, where you're programmable, is a threshold of a 1. So anyways, you're at a 2. You got sideswiped. You look down at your stomach and realize the drive stick, and one of the pieces of the car had punctured into your ribs, whatever might be there, a door handle, whatever. And you see the blood leaking out, and boom, you just drop down to a 1, and the next thing you know, you're passed out. Because you freaked out and you reached that level of anxiety, and your conscious mind shut down and your subconscious mind took over and was trying to save you, so it had to shut down your awareness and your consciousness and things that it didn't need. So while you're unconscious, bleeding from your stomach from all those events, and you're under a 1, you're at a 0.9, you're at a 0.8, you're at a 0.7, and your subconscious is controlling your body. And the people are looking in the window and saying to themselves, "Oh, that poor man, look at that, he's bleeding, he's going to die." You're unconscious, you're being programmed. They don't know they're doing it. You don't know what's happening to you, but they pull you out of the car, the ambulance comes, you get to the hospital, and you regain consciousness. You're at a 0.1 now, you're rebounding, you're coming up. You're at a 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Your wife is there, she's holding your hand. Little Bobby's okay in school, Billy, whatever. And your boss called and said you're getting your job, and you're getting happier and happier, and you're back up to a 3. And then when you finally get the job and get a promotion, you're back up to a 4. So from 0 to 4 are our emotional states. Now think about the worldwide lockdown and people's situations. And once people reach that 1, they're going to lose their consciousness. And it might be that somebody, like the millions of people who have lost their jobs, and maybe the bank is even going to threaten to foreclose on your house, or the landlord says, I don't care, you have to pay your rent, I have a mortgage, and your girlfriend says, well, I'm going to go stay with my parents, we don't have the money, and anyways, you start coming down from your healthy 4, 3.7, 3.8, 3.6 consciousness, your natural, normal, emotional state. I hope all this is making sense, because what we're going to see in the future, if everything is unfolding as we're seeing, people are going to continue to drop on their emotional level. And not that they can understand it, but maybe if they understand this conversation I'm having, a lot of people will be able to deal with it, and a lot of people will be able to deal with other people that it's happening to, and we can help each other instead of watching somebody go berserk in the street and thinking that they're just nuts. They have just been overloaded, and they crossed the threshold of one, and they went into a conscience blackout state, although they may be in fear or rage, and probably even dangerous. It isn't their fault. Their system has just reached that point. They may have engrams or programs in them that they had as a child of fear, of being hit and being beaten, or seeing the parents or mother beaten, or some tragic thing, traumatic thing. So once you understand what has happened to the person, it probably helps everybody present on how to deal with it. And with this situation, even on the videos I was watching on the internet this morning, one guy in particular was talking about that they're killing a lot of cows and animals and chickens because they can't get them to market and they can't feed them. So the government is actually telling them to do that. They're plowing under all kinds of crops and stuff not being harvested because, again, they can't do it. They can't get it to market. We're in a worldwide lockdown. So if you take this information on May 3rd and you extrapolate it out to, let's say, another month or two, and you go look at the grocery stores right now, you can see in the dairy department or the meat department, it's pretty much empty. The TP department and the cleaning supplies and sanitation napkins and stuff like that. So you're already lowering your emotional state, according to Dianetics. And I was reading it, and I want to read a little bit from the book that describes this in detail. But in particular, I want people to know that these kinds of emotional states are going to occur if the trend continues on the path we're at, where when this quarantine started worldwide, it was for 2 weeks, from the middle of March till the end of March, almost actually March, Friday the 13th of all crazy days, to the end of March. And then as they got close to the end of March, they said they had to extend it one more month, April. Then they said it's going to be 2 months, possibly 2 years. And now if you go on the internet or the news and you listen, they're all talking about we will never go back to the normal. This is the new normal. And apparently people will not be able to go back out into the public arena, period. Go out in public, go out and get public jobs, unless we get some kind of vaccine and some kind of document verifying we've been vaccinated. And apparently it could be on a regular basis. You're talking about a seriously controlled, manipulated society, and certainly it's going to lower people's emotional levels, certainly below the healthy 0.4, down into the range of 3, assuming you have some money and can survive. And if you're struggling and you can't pay the bills, you're going to go down into 2.7 and 2.5. And if other extreme things happen, you start meeting with a bunch of people in your neighborhood and the SWAT team shows up and says groups can't gather together and you get arrested, you just jump down to 1.2, 1.3, and you're getting close to that threshold of erupting into fear and rage and literally blacking out and becoming highly susceptible to being programmed, controlled, or doing dangerous things, having a heart attack, having other kinds of illnesses, going insane, and so much more. And it seems that the powers that be, the system, the government, the hospitals, the experts in psychological warfare, they're all aware of these activities and how the human mind works. So if you can understand this, and this is a big thick book, but back then, say I was 30 and I'm 65, 35 years ago, I read this entire book. I had the ability to hypnotize people, to count to 7 and you're going to go to sleep. I'm going to count to 7 backwards and you're going to just relax and go to sleep. And I would do 7, 6, 5, 4. I don't want to hypnotize you or anybody. And I would have to do it 2 or 3 times, telling them to relax. And apparently I had that persona that people trusted me and liked me and allowed me to do it. And I turned on the tape recorder and I would tape record the whole thing because of the ethics involved in that kind of activity. And they would hear themselves regress all the way back to a child and tell about Valentine's Day or Christmas and who was there. And I recorded it every time. So anyways, it was quite successful at my natural ability. After reading this book and understanding how to do it, it's called regression therapy. And I was sitting in a hotel room, I'll never forget it, crazy me, and I decided to try to regress myself. True story. And so I told myself to relax, you know, and go backwards in my life. Well, all that happened is I got a serious headache. And I could never hypnotize anybody again. I somehow destroyed that ability. That something within me was destroyed when I tried to regress myself. Isn't that crazy? So I always wanted to read this book again and maybe get that ability back from way back then. But I was reading this yesterday and I said, and I've been reading it all year. You can see I'm almost halfway through the book. Again, I have to remind myself, you forget what you read 35 years ago. And I've been picking it up and I'm quite deep into the book. But there was a section in this book I thought I would read about emotion and how this thing works. Because of the times that we're in, I think any kind of forewarned or information about how people work and how emotions work will maybe help all of us deal with this coming situation that promises to lower everybody's emotional level, getting it down into the dangerous range as the threats to our life and security increase. Going into states of hysteria or dealing with other people who go into states of hysteria, you have to be careful once they cross that threshold. Once they go into rage and anger and fear, and they're not consciously alert anymore. Trying to talk to them like a normal person isn't going to help. Saying that they're crazy when they're unconscious, almost, even though they appear to be awake and in a rage and fear and screaming, whatever they're doing, their conscious mind is shut down. Their subconscious control mechanism has taken over. And if you say things, he's crazy, he's nuts, and things like that, it's all being programmed in that person. So if you're going to do anything when people wind up in that state, you have to say, you're going to be okay. Everything is okay. You just console them, assure them, try to get them to relax, go to sleep or whatever. If they had some kind of drug to make them get to be knocked out, that would probably be helpful, or a pill. Because when they woke up, you'd have to talk to them and calm them and bring them back up. But it is the natural fight or flight mechanism that kicks in when you reach about point 1, and below that it's all approaching death. It's all in the Dianetics and L Ron Hubbard, and there's a portion in this book I was just reading that seems to be appropriate for this conversation. And I wanted to share my history about this book, and that I've been reading it for the past 6, 7, 8 months, planning someday at the right moment to make a video. I mean, you're talking about a 1-hour video. I've already wasted a half an hour on the opening, and so I'm not going to be able to discuss much. But the book is out there, and basically it just tells people how to get rid of particular psychological defects, phobias, programs, engrams, things we acquire in our life during times of trauma and situations like that. L Ron Hubbard, Dianetics, how the mind works. So let me go to where I was reading from and just read from the book and throw in my 2 cents. Chapter 6. Emotions and Dynamics, page 161. Now remember the situation we're in right now, and the people who control our reality have been researching mind control, psychological control, human behavior quite extensively, even during the Nazi government during World War II. They were heavily into that. And during the program called Project Paperclip, when they went over to Germany and grabbed all those scientists and brought them back to the United States, some of them were grabbed and taken to Russia and Britain and France and etc. They continued all of those mind control programs, and it was lots of videos on YouTube and books you can buy. MK Ultra, a Project Montauk, using technologies, using drugs, using electroshock treatments, and even surgery, cutting out parts of the brain. Our leaders, our governments, the secret forces in the background have been delving deeply into these technologies, if you want to call them technologies or sciences, quite extensively, and are so good at it that they use that manipulation like 911 to bring us this worldwide shutdown to something that appears to be a normal flu season, and all kinds of videos by doctors and others on YouTube and websites, and even in a newspaper, even the President Donald Trump canceling the funding for the WHO or the CDC, for the disease organization, canceling their funding because inappropriate activity and non-disclosure and all of that. There seems to be something rotten going on behind the scenes. So it's all been intentionally brought about to bring about the global world order. In other words, they know what they're doing with our minds and the fear. And we know that if you have your job and you're healthy and you're elated and you're successful, you're at a 0.4. Crap happens, stuff happens, you get down to a 3. Now you're between 3 and 2, it really gets bad. And then between 2 and 1 is the danger zone. And once you reach 1 down to 0, that zone of emotional consciousness is you are unconscious. Your survival mechanism has kicked in, and you're completely susceptible to being programmed. And you're going to people, not you, but whoever this might be happening to. And we've all seen friends and family members who, even under the slightest amount of stress, seem to go off on a tangent and go crazy. And some people are just more emotionally susceptible than others. So if I'm looking at the future correctly from what I'm seeing going on now in the past 6 weeks, 7 weeks, we can extrapolate that and see that the situation, the stress is going to step up. More people are going to fall over the edge. So we're going to see a lot of this situation. And when the person reaches the 1 zone and 0.9, it isn't their fault anymore. They've crossed the threshold of what they can deal with. So emotion and the dynamics. Emotion is a 0 quality, which is to say that it is so involved with life forces that Dianetics at this stage handled it with an invariable success, but does not attempt to give forth more than a descriptive theory. Emotion. Much research must be done on emotion, but so long as the therapy embraces it and releases it with success, further data can be dispensed with up to a point. Emotion would have to be divided simply into minus emotion and plus emotion. The minus emotion would be non-survival in character. The plus emotion would be pro-survival. The pleasant and pleasurable emotions are not of any great concern to us here. It is believed that all emotion is the same thing, but in its aspects above 0, 1, it can be bypassed as unnecessary to explain at this time for the purpose of this book. In zones 1 to 0, emotion becomes very important to therapy. As has been covered earlier, zones 1 and 0 are the anger and apathy zones respectively. From death up to the border between anger and the fear zone 0. From this borderline to the beginning of boredom is anger zoned 1. As it is as if the survival dynamic in becoming contracted into zone 1 first began to display hostility, then on further. So the survival dynamic in becoming contracted into zone 1 first began to display hostility. So when people cross the threshold of 1, their first action is going to be hostility. And of course, they're going to try to fight people off and get them away from them. They've reached that point where they're literally consciously blacking out. Then on further suppression towards death and anger. So the lower they go down from 0.9, 8, 7, 6, 0.3, 0.2, 0.0 is death. And in these kind of states, it's also extremely stressful on the body, and they could go into an epileptic seizure or stroke or a heart attack or other biological failures in their body and kill them, of course. On further suppression, rage began to be displayed, then fear as the next lower level, then terror, and finally, just above death, apathy. So just before they die, between maybe 0.3, 0.2, 0.1, they reach a point of apathy. They don't care anymore. They're giving up the ghost. They're just going to allow themselves to die. And as the dynamic is suppressed, the cells react forcefully to the menace. It could be said by resisting the menace. The analyzer resists down to the top border of zone 1. So our consciousness, our analyzer, ourselves, me right now, you watching this video, our computer brain, our analyzer is working, processing, finding solutions, solving problems, maybe multifaceted. And like that one test I took in Edmonton, you have all these peak things going on in your brain, and the more of these you have going on, the more stress factors, the more things that are getting out of control, it brings you down. It starts to drive you mad. Just saying, so we need to, when people get into this particular state, they need to recognize it and just go take a nap, get a glass of wine, do something to relax, shut down for a little while to bring yourself back up. Because if you allow your brain to start racing, your computer, your program, it's just going to spiral down. And this doesn't have to be you. It could be somebody you know, your loved one, your friend, a stranger. We all have to help each other during this particular situation in reality, without a doubt. That reminds me of something else I've been wanting to say in my videos for the past few weeks. I was trying to figure out where to insert this. But I was thinking, you know, across America, across the world, a lot of people, probably older people, do have a little bit of money, have a house, and a lot of maybe younger people, and it doesn't have to be a younger person, it could be an older person, but a lot of people are going to wind up in a homeless situation or a seriously stressful survival situation. And it is my opinion that across this whole world, we can help each other, that if you have the means and the money and the house, you don't have to have a lot, and you know somebody who's in these stressful situations, a son or a daughter, a cousin, a relative, a brother or sister, or maybe a friend or something, this is a time to get a hold of that person and tell them to come stay at your house for a week or two, or whatever it takes. Take the extra spare bedroom, help reduce the stress. And if people were to get the word out across the planet for people to do this who have the means, to reach out to people who do not have the means, we probably can alleviate a lot of this control and destruction being intentionally caused by the people who understand the human emotional behavior patterns. I'm just saying we need to help each other, and this is not a time to just think you can just hunker down for yourself. If you have an extra room and you know, when you cook some food, rice or meat, you know, you can always feed another person or a couple who are struggling. If you have the means, this is probably the time to get a hold of other people and bring them into your world. And who knows, they might wind up saving your life too. And together, people can be organized and accomplish more than any one lonely person or a lonely couple. Just saying, this is a time to reach out. If there was ever a time with all these people, waitresses, bartenders, hairdressers, people who work at the gymnasiums, it's nobody's fault that the powers that be has brought this situation to our reality for a higher purpose of a global world order. And apparently the higher powers are obsessed with depopulation. So it's only going to get worse. They're destroying the food supply. Who knows when they could say we get a terror attack and they shut off the electricity, shut off the water, cause so many problems. If you can bring some other people into your world, this might be a good time. Get them out of the city. Get them out of the situation. And as a big country as we are, helping other people is probably an important idea, a very necessary idea, action to be taken all over the world. Back to the book. And as the dynamic is suppressed, the cells react forcefully to the menace. And it can be said by resisting the menace. So whatever the menace is, whatever the disaster is, whatever the stressful situation is, the analyzer, your brain, your computer brain that operates all the time solving problems, reacts down to the top of the border of zone 1. So consciously, you're functioning until you get around 1. But in ever decreasing control. So once you start spiraling down, unless you can understand what's happening to you or somebody else, it's just going to spiral down. From here on down, the cells, the actual organism, do not do the resisting in a last-ditch effort. So your survival mechanism, your subconscious, is going to go in a last-ditch effort to try to save you. The reactive mind is thoroughly in command from the top border of the zone 1 straight on down to death. So they call it the reactive mind. Once you leave the analyzer mind, from 1 up is your analyzer mind, is your computer brain, your thinking, your brain, your processing, your planning, your scheming, your survival, your earning, you're getting food, growing crops, helping the family. Your consciousness is working. But once you reach 1 and it goes down, it goes into the reactive mind. The analyzer mind, your conscious computer brain, is blocked out. So the reactive mind is thoroughly in command from the top border of zone 1 straight on down to death. And it is in ever increased command And it is an ever-increasing demand of the organism, your body. Little breeze coming up. It feels good. It's hot out today. As the dynamic is suppressed. Here we go. Hope you followed all of this. And I hope you learned something and we can assist each other when these situations start to appear. You can understand why they appear and what is happening to the person. They need positive reinforcement, and they need to be mentally shut down for a little while till they come to, and then they need to be talked to and calmed down and reassured. But leaving people out there to destroy themselves is not a good idea and probably not a humane thing to do. Emotion seems to be inextricably connected up with the actual force of life. That there is a life force no engineer could doubt. So there is a life force. I did a book on William Reich's work, Orgon. And if you know anything about the kahunas, the the religious tribes in Hawaii, kahunas, and other Mayans, you know about mana or prana, some kind of life energy force that we can call upon to strengthen ourselves. So the life force does exist. That there is a life force no engineer could doubt. Man and medicine usually look at the pitcher and forget that the pitcher is only there to hold the milk. So our bodies are here only to hold the life force, our spiritual self. Just as the helium, which fills the free balloon. Out goes the helium, down comes the balloon. So if our life force leaves our body, people freak out to such extremes that their spiritual entity can actually leave their body. And then the human body just plops over dead. Without the life force inside, the body will plop over dead. And there have been people who got in head-on collisions in cars, and they were so emotionally challenged that just before the impact, the spiritual self leaves the body, floats in the air, watches the car wreck, watches their body, watches the ambulance take them out of the car wreck, starts to revive them. When they revive, that life force looking down, there's books written on this, goes back into the body and then looks up and remembers the whole situation. Fascinating conversation if you got those books and look into that. Out-of-body experiences. So out goes the helium, down comes the balloon. Out goes the life force in your body, the body pops over dead. It starts to happen after you reach zone 1, going on to zone 0, when your active mind analyzer cuts out, crashes computer, and your reactive backup system, your subconscious mind, takes over and tries to survive all the way down to your spiritual survival. When this type of energy is located and isolated as itself, if it is just an energy type, then medicine can start to move forward in strides which will make all former steps look like those of a man in a sack race. Medicine doesn't have any spare helium, for one thing. How high this life force can go on the survival scale is not known. So when you reach point 4 and you're in a very healthy planning, scheming, going to work, building, successful state, that's kind of an ideal situation. Some people who want to go into Maverna or like an Indian yogi and go into a 5 or a 6 and actually live above the human conscious state and observe the universe through the spiritual eyes instead of these 0.4, 0.3, 0.7 level motion physical eyes. So some people can meditate and rise up to 0.5 and 0.6 and be outside the box of the human body, almost looking down at their own human self and saying, I don't need this body anymore. I realize I'm a free spiritual being. Now, certainly that's a better place to be than down between 1 and 0. Just saying, and it's mentioned in this book, so when I read it, I'll just read it. How high this life force can go on the survival scale is not known. Above zone 3 in the area of question marks. A clear is a person who doesn't have those programs, engrams, and other anomalies that cause people to have different kinds of phobias and stuff. They either were very lucky growing up in a very healthy family situation and never got any of those nasty engrams programs, or they went to a psychotherapist or a hypnotist and they actually cleared all those things, and it makes people a healthier person to become a clear. Dianetics, that's what it's about, helping people become a clear, get rid of all those phobias and problems. And so a clear goes up into a level of persistence, vigor, tenacity, rationality, and happiness. So if you can realize all of this and become a clear, you wind up in an intellectually very capable state of being. You can solve most problems. Perhaps someday a clear will attain the nebulousy the author used to hear about in India, which marked the man who was all soul. So they do mention that here, that when you become a clear and you're able to go even higher to that, to a 0.5 or 0.6 or 7, you become one of those Indian yogas who can sit there in the middle of winter and not eat and survive with all these super spiritual powers. How far down it can go is definitely known. So he's saying how high you can go, they don't know. But how far down you can go, they do know. And the states that happen between 4 and 1, they understand it's the crashing and burning in these stressful situations that happens in our life. The more stressful, the more problems, the worse it gets, the closer we approach 1. Then the lights go out in our mind, and the reactive mind takes over, and we're in a semi-state of hysteria, and it just gets worse. And then about 0.1 or 0.2, you come to apathy, you don't care, you just want to die. So how far down it can go is definitely known. A man dies. He doesn't move or think. He dies as an organism, then he dies as cells. There are different periods of life after death. For the cells and biologists remark that the hair and the nail cells do not die for months. So here is a spectrum of death, first the organism, and then colony by colony the cells. This is from the bottom of zone 0 downward. So apparently when you reach 0 and you die, your hair and your cells and your fingernails and stuff like that continue to be alive and grow for a while. But apparently I think that the life force might be somewhat still connected to the body, unless somebody's cremated. But what we are interested in is the area from zone 1 down to the bottom of zone 0. So I've talked at great length about that so far, what it really means. So when I read it in the book here, I can just move forward. It could be postulated that the analytical mind has its greatest bounce against the suppressor, its highest ability to care for the organism, when it is in the 3rd zone. So between 3 and 4, you're in your best survival zone, planning, stocking up on food, making sure you have water. What are you going to do when it gets worse? You know, all these things. And people have been into this survival mode, preparing mode for the end of the world mode for quite a while, building underground shelters, all these things. And that's sort of a self-destructive thing for all those years of stressful thinking about what would be looming in the future. But if the event happened, then it would have been the correct thing to do. As the suppressor thrust downward against it, the analyzer, your brain, within a lower zone 3, thrust heavily back. So as you start having these stresses that bring you from 4 to 3, and then maybe under 3, your analyzer, your brain, starts struggling. It's like if somebody broke into your house and was looting your house and had tied you to a chair. You know, and then they left, and you would be struggling to try to get the ropes free to call the police. So the more you get in this situation where it gets stressful, and the suppression, the world situation, the stresses start pushing down, your analyzer self starts pushing back. And that starts to use up a lot of your physical, mental energy. This is necessity at work. This is necessity at work. The necessity level can rise in this action to a point which keys out all engrams. So when you are getting in this survival mode, when you're being attacked, your analyzer, your brain, overrides your fear of heights or snakes or whatever your program might be, and overrides all of the engrams that are installed in a lot of people from different situations in life, whatever. It must be realized that the analyzer considers future suppressors and is continually engaged upon computations which pose problems of the future, which the analyzer resolves. This is one of the functions of the imagination. It must be further be realized that the analyzer is engaged upon a multitude of computations about the present, for the analytical mind is dealing continually with an enormous amount of factors which comprise the suppressor of the present and the suppressor of the future. So our analyzer computer mind is always doing multiple computations, problem solving, looking for solutions, get out of the city, get some money out of the bank, go stay with grandma in the country. We're all processing, trying to plan on a survival thing as things continue to get more stressful and doomful. Things don't look good if things are continuing the way that they're continuing. And it looks to me like the things are going forward, looking at the newspapers and the media release program. It looks like a united world thing right now to continue going forward. And they're even now talking about a second wave of deaths. And apparently it seems to be something that's going to happen. And people need to come to grips that it is all a planned event and deal with it as best we can. It computes your brain, for instance, on the alliances with friends and symbiotics, and its greatest victories are achieved by taking some of the suppressor and turning it into an alliance factor. The individual can be visualized on the survival spectrum as being at the tip of a survival dynamic. The suppressor thrust down, or future suppressors, things that would pull you down into the stressful situation, which threaten a thrust, and the analytical mind thrust up with solutions. So the more that these things happen, the more shutdowns, the more stores that close, the more the meat, more the vegetables, the more the water supply, the more the things. We're all going to push back and push back, trying to come up with solutions. But again, I say it is all a moot subject. It doesn't matter if people aren't willing to wake up and realize that this whole situation is a worldwide planned situation, like the situation after 9/11 and the destruction of all of those countries was a planned situation World War I, World War II, 9/11, Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, economic collapses where the elite just rake in trillions and trillions of dollars. Those are all planned situations. And that's the first level. And then also realize we are spiritual beings. We can rise up above the 4. We can go to God. We can pray. We can get 0.5 and 0.6. We can be bigger beings than we are. We never have to get down here. 0.2, 0.1, below that. Go higher. Go with God. Whatever your religion is. Go with your spiritual self. Believe. Have faith. Calmly walk into the storm with no fear. The fear brings you here. The love brings you here. More love brings you here. More compassion. More helping people. We're human beings. We're spiritual beings. We're both. We should act like we're both. Don't abandon God. Don't abandon your spiritual, soulful self. Don't abandon love. They want the forces of evil, the negative forces of hate and killing and robbing and theft and perversions. They want to drag everybody into their pit. Literally, drag everybody into their pit. Down into level 0 and death. And people will struggle and kill for food and water, taking themselves to the pit. Instead of going with honor and love, even if you die, to heaven. It's only a human body, flesh and blood. Nobody gets off of planet Earth alive. What do we have to lose by knowing this stuff? Helping other people. But the powers that be want us to keep apart 10, 12 feet. Don't go out of your house. Put a mask on. Don't breathe fresh air. Don't get any sunshine. Don't make any money. Don't get any work done. Don't worry about the food supply. Somebody else is going to take care of you. The farmers in Texas, if you watch the video I was watching this morning, on one of Max Egan's recent videos, you can go watch it. He shows you the guy talking from Texas that the government's involved in. They're killing the animals and destroying the crops. And it doesn't take a genius to see where this is going to lead to in a month or two from now. Go to the store right now and take a look around. This whole thing has not been pulled off for the powers that be to back off. They would be in big problems. Apparently, they're taking the trillions of dollars a day and they're buying up city bonds and debt and companies and corporations. Everybody that's collapsing, these people who control our world in the banking system, are buying everything up. The days that follow, when they start letting people out after they have their injection of some kind of vaccine, DNA altering drug that changes the person you are, that turns you into a zombie, and you get your mark on your skin or a card to verify that you have been reprogrammed, vaccinated, and nobody else will be able to get integrated into the system unless they get that done. They're talking about the sports, football or baseball or whatever, getting all those people to get their shots so that they can go play. And what they do, apparently they have these drugs that can alter your DNA, turning you from a God-loving, human-loving, compassionate, intelligent thinking being into an apathetic, angry, survival mode, lustful creature, a dark creature. So they can turn us from love creatures to monsters with these vaccines they want to stick us. And I watched the video. I've seen the pictures of the brain scans and what the scientists were saying. This isn't my imagination. This is artificial intelligence. This is monitoring cameras. This is a program going on in China right now. Watch the videos. The level of the individual is determined by how well the suppressors are apparently met. We can speak of a clear, and until further mention, we will continue to use the clear. A clear, again, is somebody who has already seen a psychotherapist, or luckily enough not to have any of these engrams, programs in our bodies, phobias, paranoias, self-destructive little programs in our mind that we incurred sometime in our life during a stressful situation. If you don't have any of that, or if you've seen a therapist or hypnotist and you got rid of those things, just like me when I wanted to stop smoking cigarettes, it was a miserable state of affairs. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, punching myself in the leg, saying that I had to be stronger than that little cigarette laying on the bed next to me. I was sitting on the bed with the cigarette laying there, and punching myself to say that why I couldn't resist it, why I was forced to continue to smoke and have my asthma problem years ago. So finally I went to see a hypnotist, and I told him I wanted to be programmed to not want to smoke cigarettes, and he did that, and it did work. So it turned out well. Of course, when I was in the Army back in 1972, everybody smoked when you were standing there at attention, and the sergeant said at ease and smoke them if you got them. If you joined the Army and you weren't a cigarette smoker, everybody became a cigarette smoker. So if you're a clear is an unaberrated person. So somebody with no aberrations, no programs, no paranoias, no phobias, no things that make them act unusual. He is irrational in that he forms the best possible solutions he can on the data he has and from his viewpoint. He obtains the maximum pleasure for the organism, present and future, as well for the subjects along other dynamics. A clear has no engrams, phobias, programs, etc., which can be re-stimulated to throw out the correctness of the computation by entering hidden or false data into it. No aberration. Hence the reason we use him here is an example. So they go on with an example here, and I'll stop this video because I reached my 1 hour. But a fascinating story here. I don't know if you can pause your computer and read it. It talks about a guy who is a rancher, and he's got a grizzly attacking his cattle. And he's a 3.9, healthy guy, has a good rifle, confident, goes out by himself, finds the grizzly, takes a shot. The grizzly just keeps on coming. And as you can imagine, 3.9, 3.2, 2.7. He takes another shot, misses the grizzly, falls over backwards. He's at 2.1. It goes on and on and on. And he tries to fire his rifle, and he fires widely, and eventually the grizzly is upon him, and he turns into a .1. He passes out consciously. The grizzly smacks him. The guy's laying there unconscious. The grizzly thinks he's dead, so he moseys away. Later on, the guy comes to his consciousness. He comes back, he sees the bear's gone, he sees that he's going to be okay, he gets backed up to a 1.7, 0.2. He thinks about his neighbor who has a high-powered, interrupted on Sunday by a survey phone call. So anyways, the guy is conscious, and he thinks about his neighbor who has a high-powered rifle. And he goes up to a 2.7, 3.0. He confidently says he's going to come back and get that grizzly. He goes and sees his neighbor. He gets the high-powered rifle. He's at a 3.9. He goes off into the woods near the mountain where the bear was, sees him, shoots him, kills him. He's elated. The cattle are not going to be mutilated. And he's up to a 3.9 again. So you can see how our human emotional state works from this video. As the stressful situation of the world continues on, we can expect to see people operate and go through these emotional states. And when they are in the unconscious state, they're highly susceptible to programming. And apparently the mind control apparatus of the secret societies and elite who control our world have taken people and put them in extreme psychological emotional states, programmed them to be triggerable, and then they bring them back to consciousness. They don't remember the program, but certain words and certain things will take them into that program, maybe grabbing a gun, going into a school, shooting everybody up, because that is when the time frame that the mind can be programmed between below 0.1 and 0.0 when they're in a trauma state. So if you see anybody winding up in a trauma state, you have to be really careful what you say about them, because subconsciously they can hear you and they grab those words and take them seriously, and it becomes part of that person. So again, I say the last thing you want to say is, look at that person, he's crazy, he's nuts, he's stupid, or whatever. You're programming the person. You're not helping yourself or helping them. Anyways, thanks for listening to my little conversation about a book that I read years ago and the history of me and this book, and how it seems that the brain works in the stressful situations we're in now that appear to be that are going to get worse, and be very conditional upon taking some kind of control mechanisms by the governments, the people who are ruling our reality, in order to allow us to integrate back into society. It's going to come with strings, and they're going to be strings that most of us won't agree with, and most of us will start festering with anger and resentment, unless that vaccine they stick us with actually turns us into apathetic zombies and we don't care. Do they have that kind of technology? According to the videos that I've seen, yes, they do. Rick Miracle reporting. Leave a comment below. Share my videos with other people. These are the times that try men and women. These are the times when people become heroes. These are the times when people show their best or their worst. Rick Miracle reporting.